Morning, Marina.
Good morning.
Hi. Or afternoon, actually, now. One went past.
Yes, morning, afternoon. So we are gathering everybody with a cup of coffee, gathering here in the gallery, and people online, hopefully also with refreshments. So we're ready to start, Henry? Yes. Okay, Marie, thank you so much for agreeing to take part in this talk, in this symposium, with your talk, a paper titled Digital Carbon Footprint. I'm going to introduce Marie. Marie is a creative industries professional and an associate dean at Norwich University of the Arts. She says that her practice, practice involves working with others to plan for culture and creativity and embraces the development of cultural places and programs. She's a keen design historian and has taught architectural and design history in Ireland and in the UK, and believe that social, cultural, and historical contexts are always valid to contemporary practices. Marie is going to talk about, we said, digital carbon footprint. So what very important topic in a day dedicated to responding to the theme of knowledges. So Marie, it's over to you now.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen, everybody, and then we can get going. Thank you very much, Marina. That's I think that's showing now. If we could just go on the full screen on play from the start, and then I think we'll have the full screen version. Thank you very much. So welcome everybody to this. Basically, it's a provocation. It's some early research that I'm doing, which I wanted to share with you. As Marina says, I'm at Norwich University of Arts. So I'm a review design in Ireland, qualified member of the Institute of Innovation and Knowledge Exchange. And I started this thinking around our carbon footprint, around our digital habits and our internet use, really during the crisis with the pandemic. And then I thought, how could we reduce the climate impact of our digital world? It's true we can't ignore climate change, and we can't really ignore the fact that we are now very much digital beings in humanity. So that the thinking about this is something that we quite often, yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Henry, Soundwise. We don't often consider that the energy used to service our digital world is actually a huge contributor to climate change. And when we think about the first time when the internet was developed, it was basically an open source world that Tim Berners-Smith developed, where we could share information freely and equally with no sense of ownership. In fact, it was like common land where people used to be, where we can all share resources. And if we think of it as a resource like that, it's almost like in our bones, it became increasingly privatized and profitized. So I wanted to go through, though, today some of the early thinking that I've been doing around some of our more common habits. And so next slide, please, Marina. So how can we reduce the carbon footprint of our digital habits? There are a number of things that we can do to kind of have what we call digital hygiene, as people and researchers are calling it more and more digital hygiene, because we've become very wasteful. And I think when we're looking at any issue around sustainability, the issue of waste is really important. Our digital use is not something that can be cyclable. It can't really be circular, but we can most definitely reduce energy use within the way that we use our internet. So Marina, next slide, please. So when we're thinking about this, the we kind of say that sometimes our internet use is the same size as the energy use of Germany, or in this quote here from Vaughan Lindsay, it emits the equivalent amount of carbon as the entire airline industry, which is not something that we kind of think about. I was speaking to someone yesterday about that they didn't understand how internet use uses energy. So there might be worth me while telling you a little bit about that. Every time we use anything online, anything digital, it has to be coded, and that code needs to somehow be stored in order that the computers can communicate with each other in very, very simple terms. So collectively, all of our habits across the world digitally have this huge impact on our energy use. So that's in very simple terms. So the next slide, please, Marina. So thinking about how we use our internet use as you know, private people, really, a lot of it is through emails and communication, through streaming like podcasting, watching iPlayers, Netflix, and that sort of thing, through the more dirtier energy use within cryptocurrency, blockchain, and NFTs, which are extremely high energy, and also electronic waste. So if you could have the next slide then, please. So I wanted to kind of come clean here and actually confess, look at the state of my Google inbox. I have I actually cleaned it up over the Christmas break. I had 8,070 unread emails. And when we think about the energy use, I'm using and wasting the world's energy just by having those unread emails in my inbox. And so I started to think, how much pollution would that cause? And generally, scientists say that it costs 4 grams of carbon to store each email. And that's each email without an attachment. Emails can go up to, depending on what size the attachment is, to 50 grams each. So weighing my emails here is 32.28 kilo of carbon that I'm releasing just with my unread emails. So I'm wasting energy for something I don't need, I don't use, and it's just being wasted. So the next slide, please, Marina. Thinking about what 32 kilos of carbon looks like, it's actually, if you look at your mobile phones now, you could look at, do a search on what weighs around 30 kilo. And you'll find that it's the weight of around a 10-year-old child or an adult Dalmatian dog. So it's actually quite a lot when you think of it that way. So when you look at these, this is like what they're saying around the Getty image here around what our emails cost. So spam email actually fairly clean at 0.3 gram, regular around 4, and like say an email with a photo could be as big as 50 grams of CO2 being released into our atmosphere. So it's something we use every day. It's something we don't really think about as contributing to climate change. But if we were all to develop cleaner habits and not have 8,000 unread emails in our inboxes, we could actually reduce our carbon emissions significantly just by using our emails. Next slide, sorry, Marina. So thinking about our emails and communication, we need to be aware of our digital habits with this and make sure that we're not wasting energy. We don't want to be creating carbon just by having lots of unread emails. So I think there's some things there for us to do, some actions. I mean, a lot of the time when we look at climate anxiety, we feel like we can't do anything, but this is something that we can actually all do. So we can regularly do some housekeeping and delete all the emails that we don't need, which I did over Christmas. And one of the key things why we have these huge amount of emails is our digital shopping habits. You will see if you're trying to buy something online, a pop-up will come up 10% off if you sign up to our newsletter. So we sign up to those newsletters, get our 10% off, and the goods arrive, but then we never unsubscribe to that newsletter. And that's why we end up getting more and more of these e-communications. What I do now is I've tried to unsubscribe from as many of those notifications as I can. And when it says the reason for unsubscribing, I tell them about the e-newsletters are a big contributor to climate change. And that's something that the companies don't necessarily know either, because it's just become common practice. This is how we work and operate. The thing that I always clean up, though, is my social, is by having, if you've got Gmail, having those 3 panels of primary, social and promotional, it's very easy to clear out the promotional and the social emails. You don't really need to know that somebody's looked at something on LinkedIn or Instagram, do you? And the other thing that we can do is actually think about how we communicate. We've got very used to kind of the spoken written word, if you like, within email, but maybe we could call or text more. An SMS, for example, as opposed to the 4 gram of mail, is 0.14, so it's very, very low. And that is a source from Vodafone talking about this. So that's really, we can do an awful lot of cleaning up around our emails and communications. The next slide then, please, Marina. So one of the things that is that I kind of, now I've tidied up my emails, the other sin that I have is I am a huge streamer. I really like my podcasts. I love, you know, the Apple Music subscription that I have, that I use when I'm cooking or cleaning, and I watch Netflix and I watch iPlayer. So how do we watch Schitt's Creek or access our playlists or watch our friends' band on YouTube then, if this is something that we need to be careful of? And I think, again, it's the idea about habits. The key is moderation. One of the key things that people said is to try to not binge watch, not to, it is like on Netflix, they keep continuing, the next episode will happen. And if listening, a lot of friends of mine who have insomnia or anxiety will listen to a go to sleep video or a gong bath on YouTube, and they'll play it all night long. So try to make sure that you're not doing that, to try to kind of see if we can make a shorter time of watching, and try to watch in IRL, if you like, as the kids would say, in real life, watching on normal non-services. At the moment, though, new technology is creating many more carbon-friendly devices, which will reduce the footprint. But for now, I think we might need to be looking at, like, really being careful and choosy about what we stream. If we're watching a film and then we kind of lose interest and start reading a book, just turn the film off. I think that's something that we're all guilty of. So looking at the idea about what streaming does, the Carbon Trust published a white paper in June 2021, which estimated an average carbon footprint of 55 grams of CO2 per hour of video streaming. So again, lots of data and figures, which I'm putting out to you there. The idea of that is the largest determining factor was how large your viewing device was. So watching on a phone is easier, uses less data than watching on a big screen TV. So it's I think watching on a TV is something like 4.5 times more expensive, if you like, on carbon than watching something on a smartphone. But we don't want to watch on a smartphone. It's very difficult for our eyes to concentrate. The next slide, please, Marina. The other thing is around digital searches, and this is kind of, people said, how much does a Google search cost? And this is very dependent on how many you do. Some people say that it's probably best to work in the library and look things up, again, IRL, to look at the library first for information. Chris Goodall, who's an author of a book called 10 Technologies to Save the Planet, estimates the Google emissions of a Google search are around 7 to 10 grams of carbon, assuming kind of 15 minutes of computer use. So having a think around those ideas is, again, can we get some of this information offline? This is really where it gets a little bit controversial, because people, you know, the information is there. but we now have to kind of change some of our habits. And I think looking at what happened within the pandemic, we developed a hybrid practice. We developed some work in real life and some digital work. And I think now it's time probably that we can kind of really look at that balance of how we live our lives. And there are all sorts of then areas around digital poverty, which, you know, are difficult to address within these kind of different areas. The next slide then, please, Marina. So the next area is basically what I kind of got thinking of around the idea about NFTs. I was really looking at digital art, the non-fungible token, which means it's an art form that doesn't have any physicality to it. It just is a purely digital form. Blockchain is the way that computers talk to each other regarding the register of who owns what digitally, which is what I was talking about earlier about Tim Berners-Smith and the internet being free land for everybody. And now people are owning bits of it through registers and data centers. The cryptocurrency, there's loads of papers there about how dirty Bitcoin is. And Bitcoin itself is only one cryptocurrency, is seen as using as much electricity as a medium-sized European country. And that came from Professor Brian Lucy at Trinity College in Dublin. It's basically that why this is so, it's seen as dirty energy is a lot of the servers that hold our digital registers are in hot countries in like California. So they need huge amounts of energy to cool them down. What's happening now with blockchain and the registers for NFTs, they're being held in cooler countries, but countries that have less legislation around what energy they use. So a lot of them are coal powered. So when I look at these things, I think, oh, I question myself, am I being a Luddite, but I think actually we can really see that this links right back to an industrial form of energy use. People say as well, that Bitcoin itself is huge on energy consumption because it constantly has to set up different data puzzles to stop hackers stealing your assets online. So a lot of that, what's called kind of a data mining, I suppose. So it uses huge banks of computers, and then all of these computers are trying to talk to each other to stop hackers getting through. So it's then sort of like thinking about solving the puzzle to get that register is known as mining, and then you get your coin, your Bitcoin. The processes demands huge, powerful machines in places like Mongolia, Iceland, Russia, China, and they're all working at full tilt. They're cooler, so they in that way they don't need as much as the Californian registers, but they do use considerable energy supplies. And so this is something that's becoming more and more known about, and even the controversial figure of the billionaire Elon Musk, who had significant funds of crypto, pulled out from his register of what he owned after he saw how dangerous and how dirty it is in terms of energy. There are also some ethical considerations around that because, of course, the internet works cross-border. It's not owned by one country, so the legislation isn't in one country. So that means it can be used for money laundering through crypto. NFTs, though, are becoming more and more popular within the art world. And again, I think it's that balance of looking at where your servers are. I don't really yet work out how we can know that, how we can find out where our data is stored and whether it's a clean register or not. But I'm sure that as we develop, we can go on that with more and more information. So the next slide, please, Marina. And then the final thing is looking at these huge figures from Statista on how far we are now increasing our electronic waste. This is something that is actually unnecessary, and through circular economy, circular design principles, there are a number of ways this could be stopped. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who are one of the key trusts really looking at circular design, have got a number of tools that we can look at and use. And one of the things that Ellen MacArthur is really keen on is the fact that we don't necessarily need to own our electronics, that we can hire them. And we hire them, and then when they reach end of life, they go back, and then the metals, the plastics and everything can be taken out and make a new device. Whereas when we own these devices, we own everything, and they tend to just be taken away and disposed of. So electronic waste is something that's grown in huge numbers. So rental of our electronic devices might be one way forward. Of course, then by looking at rental, it makes it easier for us to recycle and reuse some of those materials as well. But again, looking at a linear model of electronic waste, it's wasteful from the start. It's wasteful from the design point, where people are using virgin materials and scraping those out of the land and then creating these products which are then wasteful. And then when they're put together, if you do two different types of plastic together and they're bonded, they're no longer recyclable. So that makes it really, really difficult to look at how we can recycle our electronic waste. So we need to be keeping our devices for longer, or looking at or lobbying for more rental or different types of users. And I do recommend you look at the Ellen MacArthur website on the circular economy. There's toolkits on there. There's loads of talks and podcasts, which I think you'll find very useful. Next slide, please. So looking at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, you can see that there are 4 of them. And this is a really lovely graphic that they put together. It's basically, you can look at this diagram here, is having 4 key areas. And I think when we're using the internet, when we're looking at our habits, I think to follow these areas would be great. The first Sustainable Development Goal is respect and care for the community of life, which includes those communities where virgin materials are being taken from in some cases. Ecological integrity, social and economic justice, democracy, non-violence, and peace. Something, well, all 4 of those are extremely important with looking at world events and what's going on here at the moment. So the sustainable, you can see then along, there's a number of different points you can see about how they work together. The interdependence of all life is something that's really, really important here. And equitable human development, I think, is also really important on number 3. So that shows you really, by looking at things through Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations, that's something that we can actually bring into our everyday life when we're working digitally, or even in real life itself. Marina, next slide, please. So this might be, I'm hoping it's not depressing you, but I think it's quite important that we have a lot of this information to hand. There are a number of theorists called futurists who are looking at this, and they're looking at how we can wake up our wasteful patterns of behavior with our digital habits. I think we must see personally our digital world the same way as we see our natural assets. We could actually see the internet get used up because energy becomes so expensive. We all, digital poverty increases and we all get priced out of using it. We maybe need to save the internet for really important things, for those who really need it, within health, for example. And I think by kind of thinking of it as a rare substance, I think we might actually think of it in a different way. So we'll be very less wasteful. But how can we continue to encourage technological growth and innovation at the same time, which is really important? And as new technologies grow, particularly in terms of renewable energy, we may find it goes the other way, that we can go back to our wasteful ways, and because it's lighter, it doesn't have any impact. it might cost us more money to invest in renewable energies for our internet use, but maybe so be it. That's better than a dead world. And I think innovators, and particular people like Elon Musk, who call themselves innovators, need to work hand in hand with energy suppliers. We also need to call out the inbuilt obsolescence of our electronic devices, and then make sure we reduce our electronic gadget waste too. Right at the beginning of the slide, the presentation, you might have seen on my right-hand side a slide which said, could that email have been a meeting? You might, those of you who've worked in any corporate world, you might be in meetings sometimes when people go, oh my God, this could have just been an email. Well, maybe we need to look at the other way around and see what we could do in real life rather than digitally. There is some evidence, I haven't clarified it yet, that if there's 4 people who live in the same city, go on a Teams call for an hour, that uses more energy than if they all traveled independently to that meeting, particularly by foot. So thinking about those habits, it just gives us some food for thought. So I'll leave, if you just go for the next slide, I think that might be my coming up to the last slide now. Yeah, so that's my last slide. Basically, this is more of a provocation. It's some work in progress. I do have lots of links to the research that people are doing in this area, including a really wonderful organisation called the Carbon Literacy Foundation, who can come and work with you to do training if you need it. They're based out of Manchester University, and they're a fascinating group. So I will leave it at that for now, but I'm happy to take any questions or start discussions. As I say, this is just mainly some thinking that I've got, so I don't have lots of answers, but it's just really a kind of a recognition of my own wasteful internet use and my own contribution to the carbon crisis within climate change. So thank you all very much. I think we can... Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marie, for such a wonderful, such a very knowledgeable explanation of what is the world today, our usage of things that are intangible, and because we cannot see them doesn't mean that they are not there. So I would like to ask our 2 presenters, Stevie and Josepina, to come in for some brief questions and dialogues. And people are saying, I had no idea, important information, I'm clearing out my emails this weekend. They are already saying, so if you can here, please. So you're